Hey everybody, I'm Matt Shares, host of the SBI podcast. Our guest this week is Milan Malivuk, the Director of Growth and Acquisition Marketing at Intellitix. Milan has a proven record of accomplishment in revenue marketing and the ability to tie marketing investment to revenue. You're really going to enjoy the show.
From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today, we are going to demonstrate how to implement revenue attribution. So, simply put, revenue attribution is the ability to trace each dollar of revenue back to the marketing or sales activity that originally sourced the opportunity. So why this topic? CEOs, chief revenue officers, CMOs need to understand what sales and marketing activities helped influence a revenue booking. Once you can quantify the value of those activities, then you can attribute revenue back to those activities that produced it. Use those insights to guide your marketing and sales investments. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. I'm also your host. Joining me, as always, is the fabulous Melissa Valdez here in the studio. Hi, Melissa.
Fabulous. I love that. Thank you. Welcome to our listeners.
So Melissa's here to point you in the right direction to some certain tools that we have, which we'll get back into. And I'm really excited about our guest. So joining us is Milan Malivuk, who's the Director of Growth and Acquisition Marketing at Intellitix. Milan, welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me. A big fan of SBI and a real pleasure to be here. I'm the Director of Growth and Marketing, as you said, at Intellitix, a tech company based out of Canada.
And Milan, tell the audience, what does Intellitix do and how might we bump into Intellitix in our travels?
If you've been to a live event, you've probably used our technology. Specifically, we started out in the music festival space with the access controller cashless payments. So if you know the wristbands that go on your wrist at these different live events that you use to enter the event or pay for, a beer or some food, that's our technology, and you probably bumped into us.
Well, now I would tell you probably most people, myself and Melissa included, have bumped into your technology. So there you go. So Melissa, I think the audience might want to follow along. So can you explain to them how they can do that?
Yes, we have actually a special treat for you all today. SBI dedicated an entire magazine to revenue attribution and how that ties back to your marketing efforts. We actually enlisted the help of B2B companies, marketing team leaders, and they developed a comprehensive how-to guide, if you will, to determine if revenue attribution is right for your company. So in order to get this fantastic magazine, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn and I can mail you a copy, or you can download it at salesbenchmarkindex.com/revenue attribution.
All right, fantastic. And Milan, before we jump into the questions, Melissa and I were doing a little fun fact research, and I understand that you have a degree in philosophy. Is that correct?
Yes, and they all said that philosophy wouldn't pay.
So you may be the only marketing leader that I have spent time who has a degree in philosophy. So what I like about that, though, is you come at it from a different point of view. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to jump into the questions. So I guess the first one, it's a softball, but maybe not the easiest. Milan, how do you describe revenue attribution?
Well, I mean, if I'm talking to another marketing, leader, then it's really just either currently your most important tool that you have in the toolbox, or it's going to be, because it's the one thing that actually connects all the different activities that you're performing with the top line revenue that the company really cares about and needs.
So it connects all the activities you're performing with the top line revenue. So if I click on that to another level of detail, talk about a little bit how you see the business value of revenue attribution to you or your peers as marketing leaders.
So revenue attribution is something that exists on a multitude of planes, depending on who you're talking to or where you're looking at it from. So for me as the leader of marketing, it's vital because it lets me have a really clear view of which activities performed, which underperformed, and that lets me tweak and optimize for each different quarter and the subsequent years, so that I know where to focus on and where to move away from. But at the at the higher levels, I mean, it can be as fundamental as answering the question of, did marketing generate an ROI? If you don't have clear revenue attribution, you can't even answer that question. But you can keep breaking it down into, which channels, which campaigns, and even which, pieces of copy have led to revenue.
Yeah. It's funny, Milan, in my work here at SBI and spending time with CEOs, we're often asked, what's the value of revenue attribution to the CEO? So for the CEOs that are listening, or for the chief revenue officers, heads of sales, heads of marketing that are listening, marketing is always a tough thing to quantify. And the old adage of marketing spends money and sales makes money, being able to point to actual revenue attribution to the CEO, less than 2% of CEOs have ever spent time in B2B organizations, have ever spent time leading a marketing organization. So this is not a discipline they understand. So as you are fighting for budget, as you think about the value of revenue attribution, you're able to point back to specific activities to a CEO to say, hey, listen, I know your job is to allocate people, money, and time for us. These marketing activities generated this amount of bookings, and this is why I know that, because I'm paying attention to the data. And so freeing up more dollars to spend to create more of that. So it's about driving enterprise value. That's why the CEO cares. Milan, from your vantage point, is there a conversation, is there a cadence that you have or that you recommend your peers have with the CEO relative to revenue attribution?
I don't know about a cadence. That sounds a little overly structured, at least for the way that we operate. I think it's more about availability. On demand, I like having that data there so that if the CEO needs some information, that I actually have it there. And more importantly, that it's clean and reliable data. There's a lot of areas, even on my journey so far towards revenue attribution, where some elements of our revenue attribution data are cleaner and more reliable than others. And it's important for me to only present those as attributable revenue, so that when I'm presenting this data to the CEO, he doesn't have to doubt the quality or the reliability of that data. Right. And basically, it's just a matter of letting him trust in what marketing is contributing, rather than viewing it as an expense or a cost center like it is in obviously a lot of companies.
Right. We've talked a little bit about the CEO board conversation around revenue attribution, because marketing is a spend. And typically when people want to cut costs, oftentimes we'll say, well, what are we spending on marketing? And is this something that we can eliminate? So talk a little bit about how you relate to the sales leader, the chief revenue officer. What's the value of revenue attribution to him or her? And how do you as a marketer interlock with them to make sure you're moving from marketing contribution, stuffing the pipeline, to actual revenue attribution?
Yep. Yeah, well, I'm really lucky to work with Eric Jansen. He's our rock star chief revenue officer. And I mean, when it comes time for us to plan how we're going to make next year's number, and even what he can count on from marketing, right, we're both starting from an informed position. So he can see not just what marketing has contributed to actual revenue, but also the investment that created that. This lets us scale those numbers up for next year's number and gives us a head start on building out the process to get us there.
Very good. And is there a specific attribution model, Milan, that you and Eric use that you found to be most effective for you based on your selling motion? Because there are different ones that folks can use.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic. I'd love to say that we have this definitive, clear-cut one. We don't at the moment. I think we're getting more towards like a first touch attribution model, because I'm more interested in what's actually bringing stuff in at the moment. Right. But I think, as we build this out and become more and more sophisticated, I envision having multiple models, because I also want to see the last touch. I want to see multi-touch attribution. I want to see all those things. So I don't have a clear answer on this is the one, this is the way to go, but I'm definitely leaning towards setting up that first touch first, and then building up the rest so that you see them.
So Milan and I are going to take a quick break from the interview, but here's what I would leave you with after this first segment. Moving from marketing contribution to revenue attribution is the way to leapfrog the competition. There are various revenue attribution models to use. Milan just rattled off a few of them: first touch, last touch, multi-touch, time decay. Doesn't matter which one that you use, but it does matter which one that you pick one. And you pick one that's right for your business. If you're in a high velocity model where you're doing a lot of transactions, first touch attribution is critical, because you want to be stuffing the top of the pipeline because you have high velocity. Last touch attribution, if you're in a much longer sales campaign, selling 9 to 12 month deals, a lot less velocity, you're thinking more about last touch or perhaps multi-touch from a certain point. The key takeaway is, am I doing revenue attribution? Am I interlocked with my sales and marketing leader and product leader? And does the CEO understand how to quantify the marketing investment? So on that, Melissa is going to share a tool that all of you can leverage. Melissa?
Yes, many of you may have just received your revenue target for the year and you're wondering how you are going to make your number. We have developed a web-based self-assessment for you to evaluate the probability of making said number. In order to access that diagnostic tool, you'll go to sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic. And the output of that is you get a roadmap of where you are now to where you want to be, and helps you make your number for next year.
A clear roadmap on making my number is always good.
Who doesn't want a clear roadmap?
Yes, very good. All right, so you're listening to the SBI podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Matt Shares, and today my guest is Milan Malivuk, the Director of Growth and Acquisition Marketing at Intellitix. So today, Milan and I are demonstrating how to implement revenue attribution. So we're going to jump back into the questions. So Milan, you're one of the few marketing leaders who has pushed forward relative to saying, hey, revenue attribution is something I'm going to pay attention to. This is something that's important. Can you share a little bit with the audience on the depth of the process that you undertook when you started to make that happen? For example, like, how did you prepare your team? Let's start with that.
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, we're still a really long way from where I'd like to be. I really think, getting to revenue attribution is more of a journey than it is a set endpoint. There's always some fuzzy areas and some places that, revenue could be attributable, but we're not doing a good enough job in that area at the moment. So, I mean, first of all, in terms of preparing the team, we're still a fairly small team, but we're growing.
Yep.
So it was really just a matter of building in this idea and this ideology of revenue attribution into every single project, whether it was, working with my content team to make sure that we're doing the right job of, tagging links and building those like tracks that are able to be recorded and therefore being put into our tech systems that are going to be able to track that all the way through the funnel. So it was a little bit of a brute force approach where there was no other option. We were just going to do it this way. And I mean, luckily everyone was really on board, so we didn't have a lot of friction with that.
And when you think about the closed loop with sales operations, and you talked about your relationship with your peer on the sales side, are there changes that you're in the process of making right now with sales ops to ensure that you can close the loop?
I think that's the beauty of, if we do a good job of automating revenue attribution as much as possible, it doesn't require that much extra effort from sales ops. If you have a system that's taking a whole lot of extra work from whether it's sales or sales ops, you're putting the data integrity at risk because there's too many touches that are being required in addition to it. So I've definitely taken the road of trying to automate as much of this as possible. There's definitely some places where there will be work to put in, and a lot of that is around the more physical areas. Digital is obviously inherently easier to automate than it is for physical attendance at a conference, for example. But even there, we've got a plan in place that I can basically outline it. In the past, all of our conference attendance has been really difficult to track the sources for, because I'm sure a lot of marketing and sales guys have heard it before. I had a lot of good conversations, but then it's really hard to show the output of what that involvement was. But you could tie it to digital a little bit by creating a landing page for that event, and just having it on an iPad that the salesperson could be either entering the people that they're encountering at the event themselves, or by having them fill it out themselves. That automatically gets tagged as that conference or event as being the source. So you're still kind of coming up with the same flow that you would have from a digital one, and it's highly automated.
So what I took from that, and for those of you that are listening, is you think about the activities that are required by your team to implement. Is Milan was just describing how for a specific event, the extra steps that they took to be able to have a closed loop. And this whole concept of being able to tie attribution, as opposed to just saying we paid for an event, we did an event, we should be able to generate this. We put some new business or new opportunities in the pipeline, but being able to pull that thread all the way through to revenue attribution. In the example we're talking about, first touch. So Milan was using that event, using the landing page as a way to have linkage to first touch attribution, and watch those deals as they work their way through the pipeline. So, Milan, my last question in this segment, did the sales force relative to understanding with the benefits for them, is it something that you would recommend to your peers, hey, you should be publishing this and talking about the fact that the organization's going this direction? Or is this more, hey, this is marketing's job in the background, our internal customer is sales, let's do this, allow them to, it'll show up in the growth number. How do you think about having that conversation and that interlock between marketing and sales?
I'm very lucky that our entire organization actually has a very honest sales and marketing alignment. And I mean, I know a lot of people talk about it, but we really live it. So from the get-go, it was just a really open conversation. Here's what we're doing. Sales is really bought into marketing. They've seen the value already. So we've all been rowing in the same direction, so to say.
That's great.
And I think it was really important in terms of, even if there's some things that might not be immediately tangible to them, like revenue attribution, like how does that help me? How does that get more leads? I think as soon as you have a very simple explanation of just, it's going to help us show where the most leads are coming from and where the biggest business value is coming from.
Right. That's
really easy for people to get behind.
Was there any new technology that was required for you to be able to successfully implement?
Yes. So there's two different approaches here. I went the tech route, and it was mostly because we were going to be implementing a lot of this tech anyway, so it just was the obvious decision for us to make. But we're using obviously Salesforce as the CRM, and then Pardot as our marketing automation on top of that. So Pardot helps with a lot of the tracking and the lead sources from the very beginning of like a prospect stage before they even become a marketing qualified lead. And then that lets us, connect easily to Salesforce so that we're able to follow all the way through that prospect's journey, including down the opportunity path. So we have that one full view of what's going on. But that's not to say that you necessarily have to have a crazy tech stack. I mean, direct mail marketers have been doing this for a really long time. So, not having a really sophisticated marketing automation system is not really an excuse to not do it. Even something as simple as, if you want to track with landing pages, have different landing pages for each of the different channels or campaigns that you're running.
Okay, very good. So one thing as we end this segment, one thing I would tell the audience to think through is the interlock between sales and marketing relative to technology. It's not new news that Milan's using a CRM and a marketing automation tool. I would tell you it is new news in the fact that how those two systems communicate to each other and the way you have shared accountabilities on your operating report that a sales leader and a marketing leader look at. That is something that if you want to drive interlock and you want to drive revenue attribution, you have to be looking at the same set of indicators to judge the health of go-to-market spend. So we're going to take another break, and Melissa is going to share yet another resource. We got all kinds of resources. She's going to share another one with you. So
yes,
Melissa.
We do. Hey, you in the audience, if you could benefit from any of Milan's emerging best practices on how to implement your own revenue attribution model, consider enlisting the help of SBI's marketing practice leader in an interactive workshop. To learn more, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/RA workshop. Sounds like a fun time to be.
Wonderful. So this is our last segment with Milan, demonstrating how to implement revenue attribution. So we're going to jump back into the questions. So Milan, can you share with the audience maybe just an example of how you have presented, even at a high level, this concept of revenue attribution to the executive team? Are there 3 or 4 metrics that you've used? Obviously, we'll share some that we've seen from some of our work.
So would you like me to share that example report here?
Yeah,
or
please.
Just talk about the high level?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So let me see if I can get a screen. So this is just a really simple export of a Salesforce report. I've just created this one just for this purpose, so it's all just kind of generic data at the moment. But at a very generic top level, the way that you can generate these kinds of reports in Salesforce, or presumably from whatever CRM that you're using, is if you're doing an opportunity source report, you're able to then filter by the different lead sources. So what I've done on this one would be if I filtered exclusively by activities or channels that I know are being conducted by marketing. So this shows me all the closed won opportunities for this year, where again, marketing would have been the lead source on it. So you can see that it's going to show me the amounts and the actual activities that were being performed. So whether it's something like Google Natural Search, which would equate to SEO, it could have been like a direct mail campaign. It could have been Google paid search. and you can actually see the exact number, the quantity of closed won opportunities, but also the values that coincide with that, and also the top line revenue that was generated from all these different activities. Yeah.
So, folks, when presenting revenue attribution, a common stumbling point is when the sales team is going to cry foul, right, about a specific opportunity not coming from marketing. So when this happens, the accuracy of the entire report can come into question. So in the last segment, Milan talked about how he's lucky he works in an environment where marketing truly embraces sales, sales truly embraces marketing, and there's this great interlock between the two. So Milan, is there a way, whether it's a shared dashboard, whether it is a shared set of accountabilities, are there 2 or 3 ways at the varying levels in the organization that you make sure you're on the same page relative to a closed won opportunity? So now we're at the end, we win a deal. How does that get sort of celebrated and a postmortem gets done when we think about attribution?
Yeah, so one of the big luxuries of that, the drive for automation of as much as possible, is that we remove ourselves from having that input. And I think for a lot of people, there's that temptation to go shopping through the closed won opportunities and say like, oh, that was a marketing sourced one. We don't have that because we just don't go shopping for closed won opportunities. Instead, by automating as much of that as possible, it's being recorded automatically from the get-go. So there's not really a question of, oh, that didn't really come from marketing. Instead, it came directly from the system. We can see actually, in the case of pay-per-click, which specific ad they clicked on, which page they landed on. So there's a full history that keeps everybody honest about where they're actually coming from.
Got it. All right. So my last question, Milan, it might be a layup, it might not be. So obviously, it takes a tremendous amount of effort to implement revenue attribution. Is it worth it?
I think it is 100%. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons why. We could spend a lot of time on that question, but I think the 2 most important ones is, for me, all that effort is saved when it comes time for the planning for next year and following quarters. I've definitely been in organizations where we did not have that, and when it came time for next year's budget, believe me, that was a lot more effort and work. So that is a boon just for the marketer itself. But also, when it comes time to defend the marketing budget, there's no better case that you can make than actually showing the clear revenue impact, like the actual top line dollars that were generated. So it's helped me in the past immensely, and I think as long as you're armed with that and you're arming your exec team with that same information, they're going to make the right decisions, and you're never going to have to worry about being viewed as simply a cost center or something like that.
Very good, Milan. That was a great demonstration. So for those of you that are listening, big thanks to Milan for spending time with us and contributing to the body of knowledge in this area. So Milan, I really, really appreciate it, and continued success for you and the team.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
So, and those of you that are sitting there wondering, boy, how is it I should think through trying to implement this? Melissa, I think you have a final goodbye for the team.
Yes, and thank you, Milan, for being on the show and for being a fan of SBI. We appreciate you very much. And for those of you out there who are brand new, we invite you to be a part of SBI's community. In order to do that, you'll go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/register. And there you can select the topics of interest to you. And when you want to receive content, I think today's topic is definitely of interest to a lot of people out there. So I encourage you to go out there and sign up.
Very good. Well, that's it for today, folks. Revenue attribution, that is where the puck is headed. So if you do not want to get left behind and you do not want to be defending your marketing budget, and as Milan said, feeling like it comes to planning season, you're getting cut and you're this cost center, paying attention to revenue attribution, implementing this in your organization is the way to go. So that's it for today. As always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.